Hello and warm greetings. Welcome to the Analyst by Vajiram And Ravi, where we would try to comprehensively analyze 7 articles in 2 different sections. In the analysis part, we'll first have a discussion of 3 different articles which have been featured in the Hindu on the occasion of the World Food Day. Then, in the second article, we'll talk about the importance of ethical AI and the need for the governance structure for the same. Then, in the simplified section, we'll have a comprehensive discussion with respect to 5 different articles which are focused on the prelims 2025 along with the value addition. So stay tuned. So coming to the very first topic of the day, that is with respect to Zero Hunger, a global call to action. So today is 16th of October and this is World Food Day. Now, the theme of this year's World Food Day is Right to Foods for a Better Life and a Better Future. Again, this is emphasizing upon the importance of the access to safe, nutritious and affordable food for all. Now today, what we see is that there are 3 different articles in the Hindu, which are catering to 3 different aspects of the agri-food systems. So the first article is a food sufficient India needs to be hunger-free too. Second article is food access is about equitable agri-food systems. And the third article is yield can't be the sole indicator for the agriculture. So today what I've done is I have tried to club these 3 articles. So we'll try to have a comprehensive look on all these 3 articles. Again, each article talks about the status and the issues with respect to the agri-food systems, right? So that is what the gist is. Now, this is a part of GS3 food security. Now, coming to the very first article, the article, as I said, it talks about a food sufficient India needs to be hunger-free too. Again, what is the crux of the article? The crux is that though India has become food sufficient, starting from the days of Green Revolution, we have become food sufficient. But still what you see is that the issue of hunger is widely prevalent, right? So we are not hunger free. Again, we have got the Sustainable Development Goal 2, which talks about zero hunger. Now, this goal of ending hunger, food insecurity and malnutrition, it still remains a distant dream for India. This is what the article talks about. Now, primarily, the article says, now this is because of many reasons. First of all, conflicts. That we have conflicts in different parts of the countries. That is one of the leading factors. Second is climate change. Very important. See, anthropogenic climate change, that is human-induced climate change, is obviously affecting the agri-systems. And that has an effect on the overall productivity of the agriculture, right? And that too on the end production of the agriculture. So that is actually affecting the overall production and the overall intake of the food. Next is economic slowdown. So we have situations of economic slowdown in the country, and that is obviously having an impact on the total food consumption. Next aspect is what the article says, that it talks about the food security and affordability challenge. The article says that the food insecurity which we are facing in India, that is not just about lack of access and affordability, but there are other issues as well. See, generally when we talk about food insecurity, what we think? Lack of access and affordability. But the food insecurity is much bigger than that, right? So there are issues with respect to poor distribution network. The distribution network of the food in the country is still laggard, right? Next is, there is the issue of malnutrition. See, again, when we talk about the issue of access and affordability, we are looking at the quantity side. We are not looking at the qualitative aspects. Now, malnutrition is something which looks at the qualitative angle of the food insecurity. That is the kind of food which is being taken by the people at large, right? So what we are seeing is that there are sections of the society who are consuming adequate food in the quantity terms, but in overall quality, they are actually lacking vitamins and nutrients, right? Next is that there has been growing unhealthy food consumption. See, by this what we mean? People are more and more consuming HSS food. What is HSS food? High sodium and sugar content, right? They are consuming more of processed foods, right? Which is obviously not good for the overall health. Then what the article talks about, that the global hunger it is actually growing at the alarming rate. And the projections are not very good, right? So what it says, that almost 757 million, that is almost 9.4% of the global population, was undernourished in the year 2023. Right? Next, what it says, that if you talk in terms of as a percentage of the population, what you would see is that in the continent of Africa, almost 20% of the population is undernourished. Now, if the same number we talk about the Asia, it is 8.1% and it is 6.2% for Latin America, right? So these are the numbers. Now, these numbers can be really important once you're writing your mains exam, right? Once you're practicing mains question, then these numbers are highly important. Next, if you talk in the absolute sense, in the absolute numbers, what it says that Asia has the highest number of undernourished people, and that is 384.5 million. Then Africa has 298.4 million. Now, what the article says is that by 2030, half of the world's hungry would be in Africa, right? So again, what we are trying to focus is that our attention has to be on this particular continent. One more aspect which this article talks about is that this food insecurity aspect, this problem, it is more prevalent in the rural areas as compared to the urban areas. One of the reasons for it is the patriarchal mindsets which we have, right? So that is what the article talks about. Next, the article says that there is a rising cost of healthy diets in the country, right? So the cost of healthy diets, it has been increasing globally, and if you just calculate it in the numerical form, it is around 3.96, around $4 purchasing power parity per day. Now, the number of people who are unable to afford healthy diets, it is around 2.83 billion. Now, the data is of 2022. Again, please understand, this amounts to almost 35% of the global population. So almost 1/3 of the global population that cannot really afford healthy diets. Next is that it talks about a concept. So see, in the economic survey of Government of India, there was the mention of a concept, thalinomics. Now, what the article says is that if you even go by the thalinomics, almost 63.3% of the rural Indians, they won't be able to afford this healthy diet, right? And that is what? It's a growing concern. That is a very serious issue. That if you just compare the 2011 numbers, 2011 census numbers, right? If you just look at that, so almost 65% of the rural population won't be able to afford the healthy diets. Next aspect which this article talks about is that we have the issue of the unhealthy diets. That is, the quality of diets which is being consumed by the people is very poor, right? As we already talked about. So the protein rich and nutrient dense foods, it is even less for the richest people. So if you just even consider the top 5% of the richest people in the country, even they are not consuming adequate protein and nutrient rich food. So that is obviously a very growing concern. Next aspect is that if you talk about the healthy diets, see, almost if any household, on an average, if it wants to consume healthy diet, that would require almost 60% of the income of the household. Again, please understand that if a particular household is actually spending 60% of the amount on the food, obviously this is unsustainable. So that is the reason what you see is that the food security in terms of nutrition, that is actually at now, it is unattainable, right? Now, what the article also says, what should be the solutions for that? First is that there has to be focus upon free distribution mechanism, right? So there has to be free food distribution mechanism, and a robust mechanism should be there at the rural level, at the urban level, at the local level, at the state level, right? There has to be a proper mechanism. Next, there has to be the establishment of food banks. Food banks is a new concept where what you're doing is you're trying to actually aggregate the food and then giving it to the needy population. Then we need to actually reduce the wastage of the food. This is what the article is talking about. See, according to the Niti Aayog, every year, annually, there is a food wastage of almost 1 lakh crores. Can you imagine? 1 lakh crores, the total valuation of that food which is being wasted. Now, this is a very big number. So we need to reduce this waste. On the one hand, we are actually having a lot of production. On the other hand, we have a huge chunk of the population, a majority of the population which is actually unaffordable, which is unable to afford healthy diets. So this is a paradox we are having. This is what the article first talks about. Again, why I have given this in this format is that we have got 3 very important articles, and these 3 articles are actually emphasizing 3 different aspects. So that is the reason I have tried to sum up these 3 articles in this particular way. Now, next article says that the food access is about equitable agri-food systems. That is, food access is important, we understand. But the importance of equity is more, right? There has to be equity in the overall agri-food systems. So again, What the article says is that we have got the World Food Day 2024, where the theme, as I said, is right to food for a better life and a better future. Now, the article tries to stresses upon the fact that we need to emphasize the access to safe, nutritious, and affordable food. Now, there are three agencies which are mentioned. First is Food and Agriculture Organization. Next is International Fund for Agriculture Development and World Food Programs. Now, these three agencies, these three are specialized agencies of the United Nations, and they have a specific mandate. All three agencies deal with the food aspect. Now, you need to tell me that where, one thing I'm giving you a hint, that all these three organizations, they are actually based at a particular location. Now, you need to tell me the name of that particular place, right? So again, the article is trying to emphasize that there has been a very good amount of effort from these three organizations, including the government of India and the other stakeholders. Next, what is the importance of food security, according to the authors? See, food security not only enhances the individual well-being. It's obvious that if someone is consuming good food, good in the terms of the quality aspects, right, nutritive food, obviously the individual well-being would enhance. But at the same time, it would also propel prosperity and social stability. That is, if you have individuals who are consuming good food, that would obviously in a way increase the social stability, right? Conflicts would reduce. According to Food and Agriculture Organization, it says that almost 733 million in the world, they are actually facing the issue of hunger. Next, food security. According to the article, it is not just about the availability, but as I said before, it is also about the quality aspect. That is malnutrition. Addressing malnutrition is very important so that the overall economic productivity can also increase. Next aspect is, if we talk about India's path towards the food security, it talks about the green revolution aspect. It says that India, through the green revolution, it became food surplus. Now we all know that green revolution with the enormous efforts of the late M.S. Swaminathan. Now he had his input in the green revolution aspect, and we actually incorporated the high yielding variety seeds, and then through the pesticides and the fertilizer use, what we became is from a food deficient country to a food surplus country, right? That we all know. Again, what this article says is that now we have become food sufficient, right? And also we have got other initiatives of the government. For example, we have got the National Food Security Act of 2013. Now this provides entitlement to almost 800 million people of the country, right? More than 800 million people of the country. Again, recently we saw that the government is making provisions with respect to fortified rice. Now this has been extended from July 2024 till December 2028. Now, next aspect is, what are the challenges facing the Indian agriculture sector? This article says that more than 82% of the agrarian households in the country, they are small and marginal farmers. That is having the agriculture holdings less than 2 hectares, right? Then the article talks about the issues with respect to natural resource degradation. So we have got the groundwater which is depleting. Then we have got the usage of chemical fertilizers. Now obviously these chemical fertilizers, they increase the heat of the soil, right? And then they deplete the natural ability of the soil to recover its strength, right? Next aspect is because of the fragmented land holding. So again, what the article says, that because of the fragmented land holding, the farmers are unable to invest in the modern techniques. They don't have the adequate resources. Next is the issues with respect to the market access. So you are not having a market access, and that is actually resulting into inefficient supply chains. And that is obviously not having good returns for the farmers. Next, how to address all these issues? So the article says that there has to be the importance of technology. Technology penetration should increase in the overall agriculture setup. Next is the water and soil management need to be given more importance. See, since years we have been focusing upon water and soil management. You must have heard about the watershed development, right? So what is watershed development? That you are focusing upon 2 aspects. First is that you are focusing upon the land use practices, right? Second is you are focusing upon water use practices, right? So watershed development comprises of 2 things, land use aspect and the water. So as to make sure that the overall natural resources of that particular watershed area, they are actually conserved, right? So we have to give adequate importance to that in the form of integrated watershed development program, right? Next is stronger farm market linkages, very important. Again, what the article is trying to emphasize is that you need to basically develop good linkages between the farmers and that too the market, right? So that the farmers have better bargaining power so that they can get adequate returns for their produce, right? Next is what can be the other steps? See, the article says that it's not just the farmers. See, food is something which everybody consumes, right? So the non-farming families are obviously equal stakeholders. That is what the article is talking about, equity aspect. So it's saying that there has to be strong safety nets, social safety nets, be it the provisioning of the subsidized food grains or the provisioning of other schemes, right? So that has to be there. Next is price stabilization. So the governments need to make sure that the prices of the food commodities, they are actually maintained at the adequate level, right? They do not cross a particular threshold, because if it does so, it would be harmful for the end consumers. So that is what the overall crux of this second article is. Third article says that the yield can't be the sole indicator for the agriculture. Again, see, the crux is that since the Green Revolution, we have mostly focused upon the yield metric, right? What we say is that if the yields are high, the land is more productive. We are not considering the other aspects, right? So what the article says, that the traditional focus on the yield in the agriculture, it's centered on the yield maximization, right? So what we are actually thinking is that we need to maximize the yield of a particular farmland, right? Now, that is yield in terms of kg per hectare. Let's say you have got a particular 1 hectare land, right? So if it's producing 1000 kgs, right? Now we are actually focusing on this aspect that this should increase to, let's say, 1200 kgs, right? So we are actually focusing upon the yield aspect. According to the authors, this is not the right aspect, right? So this, according to authors, is leading to unintended consequences. That is, the health is getting compromised, the farm economics is getting compromised, and ultimately the sustainability is obviously getting compromised. Because in terms of the land, see, again, if you want to increase the yields, obviously you would use more fertilizers, more pesticides, right? And that would obviously deplete the overall capacity of the soil to rejuvenate, right? It would deplete the soil in its overall nutrients, right? So that is what the article is talking about. Next is, what are the negative impacts of the high yield agriculture? So again, according to a study which was done by the Indian Council of Agriculture Research, it said that the high yielding varieties of rice and wheat, it actually reduces the micronutrient densities. So it also gives you a particular number. It says that the zinc on an average, it reduces the amount of zinc in the crop. It reduces, if you're using high yielding varieties, it reduces by almost 33% on average. That is for rice and wheat. And for iron, it reduces by 25% on average for rice and wheat, right? Next, what we see is that if you have such a situation where the micronutrients are getting reduced, obviously it would lead to other health implications, right? So according to the National Family Health Survey, almost 1/3 of the children under the age of 5, they are actually stunted. And almost 2/3 of the children, they are anemic, that is having iron deficiency, right? Next aspect is that, again, see, there is something which is crop response to the fertilizers. Again, if you are slowly increasing the amount of fertilizers because you want more yields, that would obviously reduce the overall potential of the soil. And the amount of fertilizers which are to be used again and again in subsequent years, that would increase because the response of the soil would reduce with respect to the fertilizers. So it is saying that there has been a decline in the crop response to the fertilizers, and it has been almost 80% since 1970s, right? So more fertilizers are needed. If more fertilizers are needed, obviously it would have more costs for the farmer, and ultimately the end consumer would have to bear the brunt. Next is, the article talks about is the year-round profitability versus seasonal yield, right? So what it tries to say is that if you are focusing upon the yield maximization, right? So you are actually having a short-term output. Again, if you want to focus upon the long-term scenario, you should actually focus upon the intercropping, right? The whole crux is that the author is saying that shift from a monoculture approach, right? Shift from a monoculture approach to a more intercropping way. For example, we have got the intercropping between cereals and pulses. So we have got the chickpeas or the beans, right? So that can be actually, they are actually enhancing the nitrogen content, right? So intercropping has to be there. So it gives you a case study of Andhra Pradesh. It says that the sugarcane, intercropping of sugarcane with chili or eggplant or other plants, let's say coriander, that actually enhance the overall profitability of the farmer, right? Again, if you will do this intercropping, then what would happen is it would obviously increase the diversity. You are actually going from monoculture to more varieties of crops, and that would obviously enhance the overall fertility of the soil and give adequate returns to the farmer. Next is, if you are just focusing upon a particular monoculture, then it would result in decline of the biodiversity and the nutrition. See, again, what we have done is that we have shifted from local varieties to high yielding varieties. Now, if you shift from local varieties, see, local varieties are something which are more resistant to floods, to drought and heat waves. But high yielding varieties, they are not sustainable. And what you are doing is you are getting more dependent on high yielding varieties. So obviously it would make the soil more infertile, right? Next is that the area sown with respect to the millets, it has decreased by almost 10 million hectares since 1950s. So understand, since 1950s, the area which was actually used for the cultivation of the millets, it has reduced by 10 million hectares. And the area for rice and wheat, that has been actually increased by almost 13 and 21 million hectares, right? So that is something which is a worrisome point. Next is that if you are actually shifting from basically millets to the cereals, then it would also lead to decline in the nutrition, in the overall nutrition aspect. Next, what the article is talking about, that there has to be a shift from yield-based metric, right? And how to do that? So we need a multi-sectoral approach. That is, see, it's not just the Ministry of Agriculture or the Ministry of Water Resources which is responsible. There needs to be collaboration from different research institutions, different ministries, state governments, local government, participation of farmer bodies, right? So that you can actually reach to a particular conclusion. There has to be a consensus. Next is nutritional security should be kept at the prime importance. That is, again, see, we have become food sufficient, but the nutrition aspect is obviously missing. So we need to focus upon that aspect also. Next is soil and water management. They are very important. So see, again, what we are saying is that there has to be integration of technology. You must have heard about precision agriculture, right? So precision agriculture makes sure that we are using the resources efficiently. We are not wasting the resources. So we have got a particular case study, which is Sagu Bagu. Now this is a part of integration of artificial intelligence in the farming practices in Telangana, right? Now this has given very good returns in terms of increasing the overall productivity of the farmland. So these are the points which the article is talking about. Next aspect is that we need to develop a metric, which is actually something like landscape diversity score. Now, again, what the author is trying to say is that there has to be diversity in the kinds of crops which are being grown, right? There, for example, I gave you the example of intercropping. So there has to be the development of the landscape diversity score so that it can actually measure the amount of diversity which a particular farmland is having. These are the points which have been discussed in these three articles. I have tried to give you a comprehensive look with respect to these, right? Now, what have been the government initiatives? First is National Food Security Act. We all know it was passed in the year 2013. Now this provides subsidized food grains to almost 2/3 of India's population. Next is Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Ann Yojana. Now this was primarily launched during the COVID times. Now this aims at providing free food grains to the poor. Next is Integrated Child Development Scheme. Very important scheme for the children from 0 to 6 years and their mothers. Now this aims to improve the nutritional and the health status of the children and their mothers. For example, through preschool education or through nutritional incentives, right? Next is midday meal, very important, to provide free lunches to the children so as to increase their nutritional outcomes. National Nutrition Mission, now we all know this is also known as Poshan Abhiyan, right? To provide a multi-sectoral program aimed at improving the nutritional outcomes for children, adolescents and pregnant women. Next is PM Kisan. So it provides the income support. We all know that it's providing income support to the tune of 6,000 rupees a year to the farmers, right? So providing the financial incentives. Next is E-National Agriculture Market, ENAM. This is primarily aimed at creating a unified national market. Again, the whole objective is to make sure that with having a strong market for the farmers, the bargaining power of the farmers increase. And ultimately, it results into more returns for the farmers. Next is we have got the initiatives by the Food Safety and Standards Authority of India. So it is ensuring the food safety and nutritional standards. For example, we have got the Eat Right movement, right? Next is Atal Pension Yojana. Again, the whole objective is to enhance the social security aspects, right? Give the insurance. So to provide a pension to small and marginal farmers, ensuring financial security. Next is soil health card scheme. Now again, this is trying to actually work upon the soil aspects, making sure that the soil remains productive and adequate usage of fertilizer is done, right? Fertilizer should not be used in more than prescribed amount, right? So aims to promote sustainable farming by assessing the soil health and providing recommendations. So these are some of the schemes which the government of India has been implementing in order to make sure that we have got a robust farm system. Again, see, the issues have been highlighted and I gave you the way forward in terms of what the authors are trying to say. So this is how you can use these data points, these arguments while writing a particular question. Now, before going to the next topic, we have a mains question. The question says, ensuring complete food and nutritional security in India remains a distant dream. Discuss the various issues confronting in realizing the Sustainable Development Goal 2 along with necessary policy actions. 15 marks, 250 words. Now, before going to the next topic, let me ask you a quick question to assess your preparation. So, question is very simple, just one question. The question is that who actually heads the Parliamentary Committee on Private Members Bill in the Lok Sabha? Very simple question. Do answer in the comment section. Let me see who answers first in the comment section. So, coming to the next topic, it is with respect to the ethical artificial intelligence. So, what has happened is that Prime Minister Narendra Modi, he has actually called for having a global governance framework with respect to the digital technologies, especially focusing upon the ethical use of artificial intelligence and data privacy. See, we all know that artificial intelligence is having its influence on almost every domain around us. And that is the reason there needs to be the importance given to the ethical aspects of the artificial intelligence. So it is with respect to GS2, agreements involving India or affecting India's interest, then technology of GS3 and then GS4. Now, let's first talk about what is artificial intelligence. We have all been using artificial intelligence. We have seen ChatGPT, Gemini. What really is artificial intelligence? See, what happens in artificial intelligence, as a definition says, see, there are two words, artificial and intelligence. Intelligence is associated with the human beings. So if the machines acquire that kind of intelligence which humans have, the simulation of human intelligence by the machine is termed as artificial intelligence. So a branch of computer science that uses computational models to perform tasks previously requiring human intelligence. Now, if you just want to know how it simply works, see, you have a system, right? You have a computer system. Now, this computer system is given certain steps to perform. Now, these steps are actually known as algorithm, right? So, the system runs on a particular series of steps and that is algorithm. Now, what you do next is that you feed a lot of data into the machine. Then the machine, with the help of the series of steps, it reads the data. It learns the data, right? And then it acquires the ability to think on its own. So, whenever you have a particular question which is posed to the machine, then the machine goes through the data through using its own intelligence, using that algorithm, and then comes out with a prompt response, which is more or less very specific to the question which is being asked. The more amount of data you have, that is the more amount of data which the machine is actually training upon, the more accurate would be the response, right? So it all depends on the quantum of data you are feeding into the machine. Now, artificial intelligence, as we just talked about, that it refers to the computer system that mimic human intelligence, enabling them to solve problems and understand the language. Now, there's a subset of artificial intelligence and that is machine learning. As I just said, that machine actually learns the data. It sees the patterns in the data and then gives you a specific response. So machine learning is a teaching system to learn from the data, enhancing the performance without explicit programming. Then you have got another subset of machine learning and that is deep learning. Now, this actually employs artificial neural networks, right? So see, we have got human brains, and in human brains, what you have is neural networks. So once you have got the artificial neural networks, that is when machines actually think on the same patterns as the mind is thinking, then what you call is artificial neural network, right? And this finds the intricate patterns excelling in tasks like image and speech recognition. That is what the overall gist is, right? A simplified version. Now, as I said, that artificial intelligence is having its presence in almost every domain. Take, for example, healthcare. Now, for instance, in healthcare, we are actually working upon the drug discovery, for instance, right? Or let's say we are having predictive analytics, right? A particular artificial intelligence platform can actually predict the kind of disease which a person can have, right? Based on the kind of lifestyle that person has, right? Next is finance. So we are having the application of artificial intelligence in finance, for example, in the cases of fraud detection or for example, in the cases of helping customers by giving them the kind of financial products they need, right, according to their own needs. Then you have got retail. So in retail, what happens is you must have visited e-commerce platforms. Now you have got personalized preferences, and accordingly, the goods are then shown to you. That is the kind of application of AI in the retail aspect. Then we have got the transportation also, right? So in transportation, we are having autonomous vehicles, right? Or we are having intelligence traffic management systems, right? So how the traffic is to be managed. Next is the manufacturing. So we have got the supply chain optimization in order to make sure that the supply chains are optimized, in order to make sure that the productivity is enhanced. We have in manufacturing. Then we have got education. See, in education, what we have is we have got personalized learning contents which are being given by different websites or the education platforms. Or let's say what you can have is the intelligent tutoring systems, right? Next is entertainment. So you must have seen on Netflix or Spotify what they give you, the kind of the content they give you is based upon your preferences. That is based upon the artificial intelligence. Next is human resource management. So what is happening in human resource management is many of the platforms are actually are using artificial intelligence for recruiting personals, right? For having for evaluating their performance, overall performance over the year. That is the kind of application AI is having. Now, what is ethical AI? We have talked what AI is. See, when the development and the deployment of artificial intelligence systems, it is aligned to moral values, fairness and respect for human rights, then that is what we call the ethical AI. That is, whatever development is taking place in the AI domain, if that is actually aligned with the moral aspects, with the fairness principles, with the kind of human rights, then that what we lead to is the ethical aspects of the AI. Now, but why is really ethical AI is important? The very first is human rights protection. Now, we all know that we have got the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So what we are saying is that is at the center stage, right? So the development should take place all around the humans. Humans should not be for the artificial intelligence. Rather, artificial intelligence should be for the humans, right? So also according to the United Nations Human Rights Council, it said that AI must respect the privacy, the freedom of expression, and the right to non-discrimination. That is, AI platforms should not discriminate, should not have a discriminative influence. Next is trust and acceptance. Now, again, whenever you are using a platform, if you can really trust it, then obviously you will continue using it. But if the trust fades away, obviously you would stop using that particular platform. So trust is very important with respect to these platforms. Also, we have got Edelman Trust Barometer report, which said that almost 73% of the consumers would stop using a brand if they believed that it was unethical. So ethical aspect is obviously very important, right? Next is fairness and non-discrimination. See, what we have generally seen is, again, as I told you in the beginning, that artificial intelligence systems, they are using a lot of data. The data which we have, it has the influence of the societal aspects on it, right? So obviously the machine would not give you the kind of response which you really need, the kind of exact response which should ideally be there, right? So there are issues where the machines have been, they're actually giving you a biased outcome, right? So what we are saying is that a study by MIT, it said that the facial recognition algorithm, it misidentified darker skinned women 34% of the time, and it was just 1% of the time for white skinned men, right? So that is a kind of biasness the machines are having because the data itself is biased. Therefore, we need to have ethical aspects integrated into the AI principles. Now, what are the ethical principles which are to be followed in the artificial intelligence? The very first is that human beings should be at the center stage in the overall development and deployment process of artificial intelligence. That is, artificial intelligence should be based upon developing the overall well-being of the human, right? Next is that the systems need to be fair and they need to be inclusive. That is, they should not cater to just a particular section of the society, be it the elites or anything. They should be inclusive in nature. Next is that the privacy has to be inbuilt into the system. That is, even if you are actually using someone's data, there has to be a proper consent mechanism which should be there, right? Next is there has to be focus upon the robust safety and security aspect. Again, this we are talking in terms of the privacy of the individual, right? Making sure the kind of data which the people are giving to the machine, that data is being used in a proper manner with proper consent. Next is that these systems need to be accountable. Again, we cannot say that since the machine has given you a particular result, humans are not responsible for that. No, there has to be a proper accountability mechanism where a particular entity or a particular person is accountable for the kind of response which is being given by the machine. Next is there has to be transparency inbuilt into the system. The systems need to be transparent. The kind of data they're using, the kind of algorithms they're actually having. See, algorithms can itself be biased. There can be a scenario where the algorithm which is being used in the machine is itself biased. So that should not be there. Next is it should be sustainable. Again, this aspect becomes really important. See, what we are trying to say is that these machines which are actually working upon the artificial intelligence, they're having big data centers and they are actually consuming a lot of energy. We only think that the coal-fired plant, they produce the pollution and everything. But these plants, these data centers, they are itself a very big source of energy consumption, right? They are consuming a lot of energy and obviously that energy is coming from the coal-fired plants. So obviously they need to be made more sustainable, right? Next, what are the ethical concerns and challenges? The first is bias and discrimination. As I just told you, these AI models, artificial intelligence models, they actually learn and propagate the existing biases in the society. Again, the thing is very simple. The kind of data which is being fed into the machine, if the data is itself biased, obviously the machine would give you a biased response, and that obviously is not good, right? So there have been instances, for example, the AI system that was used at hiring at Amazon was found to favor male candidates over the females due to biased historical data, right? So in the bracket, you have got the source of the data. Next is there are issues with respect to the privacy and surveillance. Very important. See, all over the world, what we have seen is that different countries are employing different instruments to basically get the data of the citizens, right? To curb the free speech. And again, this is obviously not good, especially in democratic societies. We have also witnessed these things in India. There have been allegations that such things have been committed by the government, right? Now, again, if you know that there is a kind of concept which we talk about is Orwellian state, where what you see is, as we say, Orwellian state, where there is widespread surveillance by the state. That is obviously not good, right? So there has to be proper mechanisms in place. If you are not having ethical platform, then this surveillance would increase, and that is not good. So many governments misuse the AI surveillance tools, leading to the privacy violation. This has been said by Privacy International. Now, jobs displacement. Again, what we are saying is that if you do this if you integrate these artificial intelligence, let's say if I gave you the example with respect to the education or healthcare or other aspects. So what you're doing is you're trying to automate the systems. If the systems are automated, obviously you would not need the humans which are actually working as of now, right? So that can lead to job losses. And that is obviously not ethical, right? Because it is having a very bad social impact, right? So by 2025, automation and AI would displace 85 million jobs globally, and therefore it can have societal impact. Now, this was said by World Economic Forum. Next is lack of accountability. A particular team of scientists, they develop a system, right? Artificial intelligence systems, and then it is giving a response on its own. Now, there is no human intervention. If it gives you a wrong response or something which actually harms a particular section of the society, right? So who is responsible for that? Because there is no proper accountability, right? So there is lack of accountability. Determining the responsibility for outcome becomes very complex. So we have got the European Union's General Data Protection Regime. Now this emphasizes on the right to explanation for the automated decisions. Yet enforcement remains challenging. Now this is with respect to European Commission. Now what should be the way forward? The very first is that there needs to be the development of comprehensive regulations. See, for example, for instance, we have got the European Union's AI Act. Now this aims to classify the AI systems based on the risks. So we have got a tiered model which is based on the kind of risks which the system can pose. And on that basis, there is the development of the overall regulatory framework and establish the requirements accordingly. So this can basically be a learning for others. Next is incorporate ethics in education. Very important. We have got some of the best minds in the computer science in the country. We have got the people who are actually pursuing their engineering, computer engineering and other fields of study. Now, this particular aspect of ethics in artificial intelligence should be incorporated, should be integrated in their overall studies, in their overall curriculum, right? So courses should include topics like bias detection, privacy concerns, societal impacts of artificial intelligence. Next is there needs to be the encouragement of public participation. See, what I mean by public participation is that it's not just the highly skilled technicians or the computer engineers or the government who are actually participating. There needs to be the participation of the community at large, and more so the marginalized sections. Because again, who would be the one who would be most affected because of the discrimination which is being carried out by the machine? It would be the marginalized section. So you need to incorporate, you need to integrate those people as well, right? So initiatives like public consultations can promote inclusivity in artificial intelligence governance. Next is there should be focus upon promoting transparency and accountability. There needs to be the adoption of those practices that enhance the transparency in the overall artificial intelligence framework. So there has to be, as I said earlier, there has to be a clear accountability framework that this person or this firm is responsible if the particular system gives a particular response, right? Is vital for building trust. Next is there has to be adequate investment in the research and development, including the methodologies for bias detection and mitigation. So research should not only focus upon enhancing the overall range of the machines or the kind of computational activity which they can perform. The innovation should also focus upon making that we actually give importance to bias detection by the machine, whether the machine is biased or not, or how we can mitigate such crises. So again, what we are saying is that artificial intelligence is having obviously a tremendous influence on different domains, and there has to be an ethical aspect to it, because if the ethical aspect is not there, then obviously it can be a red flag for the overall human race, right? So that is something which we need to incorporate, and that is why Prime Minister Modi has emphasized on having a global framework for the ethical artificial intelligence. This is what you need to know with respect to this particular article. Now, before we go to the next topic, we have a mains question. The question says, artificial intelligence is becoming an integral part of various domains. This highlights the importance of having a robust ethical framework for artificial intelligence. Elaborate, 15 marks, 250 words. Do write a particular answer on this question. So coming to the simplified section, we have got the first article which talks about the importance of the containers. So we have got these containers, uniform sized containers, which are actually used for transportation of goods. The crux of the article is that India needs to invest substantially in the container manufacturing if it really wants to exploit or optimize its logistics, right? And then ultimately the trade and ultimately the overall economic setup, right? So what it says is that India's rapid trade volume, it is planned around containerized transport of goods. However, what the article says, there is a key logistical bottleneck and India does not have enough containers. Again, what the article is saying is that these containers are really very important. So if you look at the kind of globalization which has taken place, it is primarily one of the most important factors has been this containers, right? So it says that the containers have revolutionized the world trade by rapidly cutting the transportation time, port delays, and it enables swift movement of the goods, right? Container boxes are standardized in dimension and the cargo carrying capacity. So they are of standard in nature. Now, what is the scene in India? Now, India is actually focusing upon increasing the container handling capacity, and we have got different projects, for example, the Vadhavan or the Galathia Bay. Now, again, we also have the India-Middle East Economic Corridor. All these projects, they're centered around these containers, right? India's container market, it is expected to be more than double from 11.4 million 20-foot equivalent units in 2023 to 26.6 million 20-foot equivalent units in 2028. Now, it gives you a very good picture. It says that India manufactures around 10,000 to 30,000 container boxes in a year. Now, if you compare the kind of numbers which China has, China on the other hand manufactures around 2.5 to 3 million container boxes. Look at the diversion, look at the contrast which India has with respect to China on manufacturing the containers. Again, the cost of container in India, that is around $3,500 to $4,800. But that in the China, it is from $2,500 to $3,500. Again, the cost is very less and the amount or the number of containers which are being produced in China, it is way too high than India. Therefore, what India has to do is, see, the demand is too much, but India is not producing enough. So India has to lease the container boxes mostly from China. Now, again, ramping up trade, it is put at risk because of inadequate container production within the country. And again, shortage of these containers often jacks up the freight rates. Obviously, if you are leasing the containers from other countries, right, then obviously it would enhance the overall cost of the product, right? And this obviously leads to congestion at Indian ports. Now, the good part with respect to India's port is that they are set up at a very strategic locations. But still we are unable to optimally utilize the importance of those ports, right? So what we are saying is that we have got other ports, for example, Colombo, Dubai or Hong Kong. They actually draw the mothership, that is the main ship from which smaller ships take the containers and then they move in different directions. So these are the areas, Colombo or Dubai or Hong Kong, which are actually using, because India doesn't have the adequate number of containers. Indian shippers are forced to depend upon short distance feeder vessels where the providers of containers do not see much business. Again, this again leads to higher tariff for our shippers. Now, then the article talks about the regional conflicts which have actually affected this particular aspect. The crisis in the West Asia often casts a shadow on the ship traffic through Suez Canal. Circumnavigating. See, again, if the Suez Canal is blocked because of any event which has happened in the West Asia, then the ships would have to move around the Africa. And again, see, if you have ships which are traveling a longer distance, obviously the cost would enhance, right? So it lengthens the voyages by 10 to 15 days and container availability takes a hit. Again, we have got Russia-Ukraine war, which has led to the closure of some of the ports, changes in the routes and increase in the overall insurance costs as well. Now, this has obviously increased the overall costs. Again, piracy is the issue over there. So what the government should do? Government should focus upon having a policy where it focuses upon enhancing the production of these containers, right? So government actually has the Make in India, right? So there has to be focus upon the indigenous production of these container boxes. So there can be a public-private partnership that is between the Container Corporation of India, CONCOR, a public sector unit, and the private sectors, or what we can have is directly incentivizing the private production. See, again, there can be different incentives. For example, direct subsidy and viability gap funding are two support measures. Then the other steps which can be actually employed is reduction in the charges of the repositioning and storing empty containers, which can help to ease the shortage of the containers. Then enhancing the container yard capacities. This can also be done so that you can have more containers kept at a particular yard, right? And it can promote the business. We already have the government which has given the production linked incentive schemes. So other incentives can be given, for example, relaxation of GST to the manufacturers of raw materials. Now this would help in reducing the input cost of container production. Then Indian shippers be given more incentives in terms of using the Indian containers, and this would facilitate the long-term contracts between shippers and Indian container manufacturers. Then it would obviously increase the market confidence. So what we can do is that mandating the use of Indian-made containers can enhance the domestic demand, resulting in better prospects of the overall sector. Next is the tracking and tracing mechanism of the containers through unified logistics interface platform. Now this can reduce the turnaround time of the export containers and ease their storage. So what the article says, again, as we said, to enhance the overall logistics sector in the country, right? To reduce the cost of the logistics, we need to adequately emphasize on the container aspect also. Then the article talks about the Container Corporation of India. So it's a good opportunity to discuss about Container Corporation. So it says that it was established in the year 1988 under the Ministry of Railways. So please remember that it is under the overall jurisdiction of Ministry of Railways. It's a public sector undertaking which aims to provide efficient logistics services through intermodal freight transport. Now, CONCOR primarily manages the containerized cargo handling, including the rail transportation, terminals, warehouse facilities across India. It has a vast network of inland container depot, container freight stations, which ensures smooth and international trade connectivity. What are the key services? CONCOR offers multimodal logistics solutions, including rail, road, coastal shipping, and it plays a vital role in the overall India's trade sector. So what its future focus? It aims to enhance the overall operational efficiency, expand the infrastructure, and strengthen the digital logistics. Again, there can be one more thing which can be important. So the government is actually focusing upon the logistics sector, and that is the reason that what we saw was that India actually ranked 38 out of 139 countries in the World Bank's Logistics Performance Report of 2023. So do remember. So what are the factors which are actually given over here? So it says that the Prime Minister launched the Gati Shakti, which actually focus upon the multimodal. We just recently discussed few days ago, PM Gati Shakti. And then the National Logistics Policy was also announced. Now, this was for improving the logistics efficiency and reducing the logistics costs. Next, we have got the Unified Logistics Interface Platform. This is what the article also talks about. For ease of doing business, and the Logistics Data Bank, which has digitized the track and trace of 100% containerized export-import cargo, right? And then we have got different ministries who are also focusing. For example, we have got the expansion of electrification by the Ministry of Railways or the Land Ports Authority of India. It has reduced the average export and import through various interventions. Then we have got the National Logistics Policy Marine, which is a single window interface platform for port logistics, port related logistics. Now, this has been launched by Ministry of Port Shipping and Waterways. So these are the kind of schemes which the government has launched in order to ensure the logistics sector becomes more efficient and more productive. Then you have got the logistics ease across different states. See, this is a particular metric by the DPIIT, that is Department of Industry and Internal Trade, under the Ministry of Commerce, in order to assess the overall logistics performance of different states, right? So that is how, and it is based on the lines of the Logistics Performance Index of the World Bank. So it has some key pillars, for example, logistics infrastructure, logistics services, and operating and regulatory environment. Again, this is actually empowering the state government by providing region-specific insights for informed decision-making and comprehensive growth. So if you just see, we have got three categories. We have got coastal, we have got, in fact, four categories: coastal, landlocked, northeast, and union territories. So the achievers are Andhra Pradesh, Gujarat, Karnataka, and then landlocked, we have Haryana, Punjab, Telangana, and then we have got other states. So that is the kind of metric which the Ministry of Commerce is also employing in order to assess the overall logistics growth in the country. Please understand, logistics is one of the aspects where government is focusing a lot, primarily because the logistics costs in India are way too high. It is from 12 to 13% of the GDP. This is obviously quite high in comparison to the other countries. Other developed countries with the logistics costs is around 8 to 9%, right? So we are aiming to reduce the overall logistics costs, and one of the aspects is the focus upon the containerized transport of goods in order to manufacture more and more containers. This is what you need to know with respect to this article. Now, coming to the next topic, it is with respect to the greenwashing guidelines. See, the crux of the article is, there are some companies, there are some firms which portray themselves as they are very much environment friendly. They actually make different claims, right? Dubious claims. And that is obviously because there is a growing awareness with respect to the climate change. And people more and more want that different firms or different corporations, they should be more inclined towards the environment aspect, right? But these claims which are made by the company, right, they are in many cases, they're dubious, they're fraud, they're not correct. So therefore, it is obviously an infringement of the consumer right. And therefore, we have got the Central Consumer Protection Authority, CCPA, which has come with a greenwash guidelines. So what the article says, to restrain the companies from making false or misleading claims, we have got the center, which released the new guidelines that make it mandatory for companies to substantiate their claims with scientific evidence. So we have got the guidelines for the prevention and regulation of greenwashing or misleading environment claims, which are made by the Central Consumer Protection Authority. Now, again, this can be important that it comes under the overall jurisdiction of Consumer Affairs Ministry, do remember. Now, this is a part of the government's crackdown on misleading advertisements. Now, this would complement the existing guidelines for the prevention of misleading advertisement and the endorsement for the misleading advertisement framed in 2022. Now, what is actually greenwashing? As I just said, that although greenwashing is used in limited context of the advertising in these guidelines, it has a much broader scope. What the scope is? See, it refers to the growing tendency of the companies, organizations, or even countries to make dubious or unverifiable claims. Because there has been growing concern with respect to environment, so they are making claims that we are environment friendly, right? About their activities, products, or services being environment friendly or climate friendly. Due to heightened sensitivity to climate change, there is a rising pressure on the corporations and governments that causes the least damage to the environment, right? Again, see, these are dubious claims. These are claims which are not verified. And a famous case which has been mentioned in this article is the 2015 Volkswagen scandal, where there was it's a German car manufacturer, there was a case of cheating in emissions testing of its supposedly green diesel vehicles. Now, This is obviously true for other companies. For example, we have got the Shell, or we have got the British Petroleum, we have got the Coca-Cola. Many of these companies have faced the acquisitions because they try to portray themselves as environment friendly or climate friendly, but in reality, they are not. So countries, they basically, they also practice greenwashing. For example, they exaggerate their forest potential to absorb the carbon dioxide, or the impact of new regulation on carbon emissions, or the carbon trading mechanisms. They often come under the scrutiny because of the kind of process which is followed in generation of credits for trade might not be scientifically robust, right? So these are some of the aspects. Now, again, we have got, for example, some of the activities. Now, the air travel. Now, these activities sought to be compensated with another activity like planting a certain number of trees, but these are not done, right? Because they manipulate the carbon trading, they manipulate the carbon credit, and therefore they benefit these big sectors like oil and gas or air travel, right? Now, sometimes what companies do is that they make genuine mistakes. Very often they lie or mislead, and these constitute more serious case of greenwashing. Such unfair practices have become widespread that even the United Nations Secretary General, Mr. Antonio Guterres, he said that there needs to be a zero tolerance policy for greenwashing, right? So again, the UN had constituted a high-level expert group to suggest measures to curb the greenwashing, such as we have got the non-state entities like corporations, which are actually indulging in these greenwashing activities, or financial institutions or cities or region. Now, what the article says that the expert group has given several recommendations, including that corporations pursuing net zero targets must not be allowed to make fresh investments in fossil fuel, right? So on the one hand, if you're saying that you are basically following environment guidelines, so why you are investing in the carbon intensive processes or industries? You should not do that. Corporations must be asked to present short-term emission reduction goals on the path of achieving net zero, and must bring an end to all the activities that lead to deforestation. Next aspect is that they must be advised not to use the offset mechanisms at the start of their journey to net zero status. Now, what are the advertising guidelines with respect to India in particular, which has been released by CCPA? See, the mandate of CCPA is to protect the consumer interest. It is just restricted to the consumer interest, and they are limited to curbing the greenwashing in advertisements of products or services. And they define greenwashing as any deceptive or misleading practice that conceals, omits, or hides the relevant information, or exaggerates or make vague or unsubstantiated environmental claims about the product or service. Use of misleading words, symbols, or imagery, positive environmental attributes, downplaying or concealing negative aspects would constitute greenwashing. Again, you need not to memorize these things, but understand what greenwashing is all about, and how the companies are actually indulging in such practices. Now, if a company, for example, makes the statement that its growth is based on sustainable practice, it would not be treated as a misleading environment claim. But what it says is that if you have got, if usage of generic terms is obviously allowed, but if someone is saying the technical terms, that we have got, for example, environment impact assessment, greenhouse gas emissions, or ecological footprint, then they are mandated to explain their meaning and implications in a consumer-friendly manner. Specific environment claims such as compostable, degradable, free of sustainability claims, they must be supported by disclosure about credible certification. They need to have proper certifications with themselves, and only then they would be given the permission to use such words, right? Now, these guidelines will apply to all the environmental claims made by the manufacturers, service providers, or traders. No person to whom these guidelines apply shall engage in greenwashing or misleading environment claims. This topic has been taken because it's a really important topic, and this I'll show you, it has been already asked in the prelims examination as well. Now, before we go to the next aspect, we have got the importance of the CCPA. So do know that it is the organization which was established under the Consumer Protection Act of 2019. So it is a statutory body. It aims to protect the consumer rights by addressing the unfair trade practices, false advertising, ensuring consumer safety. CCPA has the authority to investigate violations, initiate legal actions, recall the unsafe products, and impose penalties. Jurisdiction, it can act on the complaints related to all the sectors, including e-commerce, ensuring that consumer grievances are addressed efficiently. Then consumer rights, CCPA works to safeguard and fundamental consumer rights like protection from hazardous goods, fair practices, and grievance redressal. These are the overall jurisdiction. Again, the overall objective of the CCPA, Central Consumer Protection Authority, is to ensure that the consumers are protected, their rights are protected, right? And then it can also have it can also initiate suo motu actions also, right? Investigations, and it has also the powers to mandate the right to recall, right? It can recall a particular product. Next, what are the 6 principles for trustworthy environmental claims? First is truthfulness and accuracy. That is, environment claims should be based on verifiable information through certificates from authorities. Next is clarity and unambiguity. That is, generic terms like green and clean should not be used without mentioning the adequate and accurate data. Next is fair and meaningful comparisons. That is, claims that compare one product to the other must be based on verifiable and relevant data. Next is make absolute and relevant claims. That is, if a claim is about a specific part or a feature of the product, then a disclosure is needed. Next, imagery should not give the wrong impression. That is, visual elements without providing the relevant details cannot be used. No misleading endorsement. That is, claims suggesting endorsement from non-existent, non-official or untrustworthy sources, they cannot be used. So these are just some of the general principles which are to be used before making the environment claims. Now, why this question becomes important is, this topic becomes important is that we have got a question which was asked in the prelims. So which one of the following terms best describes the term greenwashing? Conveying a false impression that the company's products are eco-friendly and environmentally sound. Non-inclusion of ecological environmental costs in the annual financial statements. Ignoring the disaster ecological consequence while undertaking infrastructure development, making mandatory provisions for the environment costs in a government project. Now, please tell me the correct answer, post in the comment section. So coming to the next topic, it is with respect to the Nobel Prizes in economics. So the overall crux of the article is that the prize has been given for the importance, for the work which is emphasizing upon the importance of the institutions, right? So we have got these people who have received the Nobel Prize. They wrote a work that is Why Nations Fail, and that gives you the reason that it is the institutions which play a very important role, right? So as said, that the award 2024 Nobel Prize in economics, it has been awarded to Darren Acemoglu, and then we have got Simon Johnson and James A. Robinson for studies of how institutions are formed and affect prosperity. Now, the prize has been credited for the winners for enhancing our understanding for the root causes of why countries fail or succeed. See, there can be many reasons why a particular country is having success and why a particular country is actually failing. But these authors, they give importance to the quality of institutions, right? So as the article says, that why are some countries rich while others are poor are debated by economists for a long time. So the Nobel Committee, as they said, that it said that the richest 20% of the countries in the world, they are 30 times richer than the poorest 20%. Then it says that ever since the Industrial Revolution, it led to the great divergence between the living standards of different countries, between the East and the West. Various theories have been given for it. For example, what we say is that some say that it is because of the Western colonialism, the primary reason for the Western world's prosperity even today. Others, what they say is that the disparities is because of the natural resource endowment, right? This the kind of explanation they give. And then what others say is that it is because of the intelligence and even historical excellence that could explain the nation's state. Now, the 2024 Nobel laureates, they actually give the argument that the difference in the quality of the economic and political institutions is what best explains the divergence in the economic fates of the countries. So what they're focusing upon is the importance of the institutions. In the 2012 book, that is Why Nations Fail, which was written by Darren Acemoglu and James A. Robinson, and the 2004 paper, Institutions as Fundamental Cause of Long-Term Growth, they emphasize the importance of the institutions. Now, why is the quality of institutions important? See, according to Douglas North, a Nobel laureate, he says that basically that institutions are the rules of the game. He gives prime importance to the institutions that define the incentives for human individuals. For example, institutions that stop the state from seizing the property of honest citizens would give the ordinary citizens the incentive to work hard. Obviously, so if you have the kind of institutional setup which is protecting the rights, the property rights of a hard-working individual, obviously the person would work even harder so that he can have even more property. That is the kind of role the institution plays. And then it gives the incentive to work hard without the fear of expropriation, and then in turn would lead to general economic prosperity. Institutions that legalize expropriation, that is, whenever the institutions arbitrarily can take up a property, right? Then obviously the person would not work. He would say anytime the institutions can come, the state can come and take my property. So obviously the incentive to work hard would not be there. Would affect the individual incentives negatively and cause economic stagnation. Now, Acemoglu and Johnson, they basically argued that institutions can either be inclusive or extractive in nature. What are inclusive institutions? Inclusive institutions are characterized by secure private property rights, where the property rights are secured, and democracy, while extractive institutions are marked by insecure property rights. Again, the basis is the property rights. And the lack of freedom, political freedom. They try to empirically demonstrate, they gave the examples, that inclusive institutions lead to long-term economic growth, higher living standards, while extractive institutions lead to economic degradation and poverty. To this end, they studied the kinds of institutions that colonialists set up in the different colonies. See, we had the Britishers who came to India. Now, it all depends. See, according to these scholars, the persons who have got the Nobel Prize, they're saying that even the colonialists who came and actually occupied the country, even they set up different types of institutions. In some of the countries, they set up extractive institutions, for example, in India, and in some countries, they set up inclusive institutions, right? So we'll see what they're trying to say. So when a colonial power did not want to settle in a certain country because of various reasons, be it the geography, for example, the Britishers could not bear the kind of temperatures, the kind of situation we had in India. So therefore, they set up the extractive institutions. It set up institutions that were extractive in nature and inimical to the long-term economic growth. And this is the case in India, where the British was devised a policy to plunder the resources. But in countries where the colonists wanted to settle for the long term, where the conditions were good, for example, in New Zealand or other countries or US for sake, so they encouraged investments and long-term economic growth. As in the case in US, where the British set up inclusive institutions for long-term economic prosperity. It should be noted that institutions can also include factors like culture, which influence a more explicit rule of the game expressed by political and economic institutions. Next question is that why don't we have got more number of inclusive institutions? So according to the Nobel laureates, what they say is that, see, these institutions, these inclusive institutions, they are very important for the overall growth. But still what we see is that they are very much less present in different countries, right? What is the reason for that? So what they say is that, see, it all depends on the rulers. What they attribute is different choices of the rulers that face in their respective countries. When the ruler of a country, they're able to safely extract sufficient resources for their personal gains through extractive institutions, they have little reason to bring political and economic reforms, and which can benefit the wider population in the longer term. And in such cases, extractive institutions may prevail for a really long time. But in other cases, what happens is that if there is a real threat of a popular uprising against the extractive institutions, at least some rulers may decide to yield popular demand and obviously reluctantly set up more inclusive institutions. So again, what they're trying to emphasize is the importance of political freedom, that people need to be aware with respect to their rights, and they need to be basically, they raise their voice so that we can have more inclusive institutions. Public participation is also emphasized in this article, along with the importance of the institutions. Now, one information which is related to this topic is that of the worldwide governance indicators. Now, this is released by the World Bank. Do remember, it can be important for your prelims. Now, this year's edition would be published on October 18, 2024. See, good governance is essential for development. It helps countries improve the economic growth, build human capital, and strengthen the social cohesion. The worldwide governance indicators are designed to help researchers, analysts to assess the broad patterns in the perceptions. Again, it can be asked who publishes the Worldwide Governance Index, and that is for the reason that I have given this particular topic. Now, the WGI features 6 aggregate governance indicators for 200 countries and territories. It is voice and accountability, regulatory quality, political stability and absence of violence, rule of law, government effectiveness, and control of corruption. So this is what you need to know with respect to this particular article. So coming to the next topic, it is with respect to THAAD, that is a Terminal High Altitude Area Defense System. Now this is a particular US platform, US defense platform. Now this is in the process of being given to Israel. Israel is being given this particular air defense system. Now see, Israel, as we know, they are actually having a war with the Palestine, and then they are actually also having the security concerns with respect to the incoming of the missiles from Iran. So that is the reason, from the security perspective, that they have asked the US THAAD, that is Terminal High Altitude Area Defense System battery. Now again, what is THAAD? A THAAD battery consists of 95 soldiers, 6 truck-mounted launchers, and 48 interceptors. See, the work is that whenever you have an incoming missile, this particular air defense system, it can basically launch a missile and then it can explode that particular missile over there in the atmosphere itself. So it can reduce the damages. So if you just see that the THAAD missile, how it works, so the radar of the system, it actually detects the incoming threat. So then you have got the fire control and communication support. Then what you have is launcher carries up to 8 interceptors. What happens then is the interceptor is fired and then the interceptor uses the kinetic energy to destroy the target. So the target is actually coming and then the particular target is then destroyed. Targets ballistic missiles inside or outside, endo or exo, right? Considered highly deployable for being easy to around. Then you have got THAAD interceptor. This is the kind of interceptor which actually intercepts the particular missile. So we have got the different components. So we have got the 95 soldiers, 6 truck mounted launchers, 48 interceptors, radar surveillance, right? And then it provides the rapidly deploying capability against short range, right, against medium range and limited intermediate range. So we have got the different range, for example, from up to 1,000 kilometers, then we have got 1,000 to 3,000 kilometers range missiles, and then we have got 3,000 to 5,000. Now this is actually developed by Lockheed Martin, and it basically it can cover a larger area than the older Patriot and missile defense system. Again, why was the THAAD defense sent to Israel? The US Defense Department decision is a part of the broader adjustments in the US military has made in the recent months to support the defense of Israel and protect Americans from attacks by Iran and Iran-aligned militias. So, Iran has warned that the US against more involvement in the West Asia conflict. US is involving as US is applying these platforms to Israel. So, obviously, Iran is agitated. As Israel readies to retaliate for Iran's October 1 missile attack, the presence of THAAD missile defense system is likely to serve as a deterrent for Iran and reassurance for Israel. Ukraine has been requesting THAAD for a long time. THAAD is not only very expensive, but it also requires trained US personnel. Israel already has advanced multi-tiered air defense system, and THAAD would significantly boost it. Now, can you just tell me which is that air system? So yes, so we have got the Iron Dome. So Iron Dome is something which is the product of Israel itself, right? So the Iron Dome is an Israeli air defense system that detects an incoming rocket, determines its path and intercepts it. So we have got a radar system which actually detects the incoming rocket and then its speed and direction. Then we have got the control center which calculates whether or not the rocket poses a threat. Then if the rocket poses a threat, the missile firing unit launches the missile to shoot that particular target, right? Then we have got the target which is actually struck by the interceptor missile, right? It was developed by the Israeli defense company Rafael Advanced Defense Systems and backed by United States. Israel claims that Iron Dome can actually be 90% effective. Now, why this topic becomes important is because it has already been asked in the prelims. So the question was, what is terminal high altitude area defense, sometimes seen in the news? An Israeli radar system, India's indigenous anti-missile program, and an American anti-missile system, a defense collaboration between Japan and South Korea. So do answer in the comment section. So coming to the last article of the day, it is with respect to the ossification test. See, so what has happened is, the crux of the article is that we have a particular MLA who was actually murdered in Mumbai, right? So we have a particular person who claimed that he is a juvenile. So the court has asked to conduct a ossification test. Now, ossification test is primarily a test of the bones in order to determine the age range of the person. What is the age, right? So to determine whether the accused was a minor, the magistrate ordered a bone ossification test. Now, ossification, what is ossification? It can be important for the prelims. It is a natural process of bone formation. This starts from the early development stage of the fetus and continues until the late adolescence. Differs slightly from individual to individual based on the stages of development of the bones. It can determine the approximate age of the person. How the test is carried out? See, in a bone ossification test, X-rays of a few bones, such as those of the hands and the wrists, they are conducted to determine the skeletal and biological development. So on the basis of the X-ray, on the basis of the results of the X-ray, we can determine that what is the age of that particular person. The images may be compared with the X-rays of standard development in order to determine the age. So the particular system, it looks at the individual bones of the hands and the wrists and their growth and compares with the standard of maturation of bones. Now, how is this age determination method used in the criminal justice system in India? So in India, a person who is basically below the age of 18 years of age is considered a minor. Now, the kind of system we have in India, the criminal justice system, it differentiates between a child and that of the adult when it comes to the procedure, correction, and rehabilitation and punishment of that particular person. Anyone below the age of 18 is governed by the Juvenile Justice Care and Protection Act of 2015. A child who is found to be conflict in the law cannot be sent to a prison meant for adults and is instead sent to observation home. So this is what this person is demanding in this case, that he is a minor, right? Instead of court, the child is brought before a juvenile justice board, which comprises of the magistrate. This can be important, so pay attention. Which comprises of the magistrate and 2 social workers. After the inquiry, the board may direct the child to be left off with admonition, community service, or a maximum of 3 years in a special home. Next aspect of the article is that we had a particular amendment to the JJ Act, Juvenile Justice Act, in 2021. In cases where a child above the age of 16 years has been apprehended for a heinous offense, right? For which, what kind of heinous offense we are talking about? For which the minimum punishment is of 7 years, right? The Juvenile Justice Board must conduct a preliminary assessment with regard to his mental and physical capacity to commit such offense or not. And then it would decide whether the child can be tried as an adult or not. So ultimately, the responsibility of knowing, of actually getting to know that whether the child can be actually treated as an adult or not, it lies with the Juvenile Justice Board. So we have got section 94 of the Juvenile Justice Act, where it is obvious based on the appearance that the said person is a child. The board can proceed without confirmation of the age. But if there is reasonable ground for doubt, the board must undertake the process of age determination. Evidence has to be obtained from the date of birth certificate from the school, the matriculation, or the other documents. Only in the absence, the ossification test is carried out. In an order passed in the March this year, the Supreme Court said that such tests, such as ossification, must be the last in the order of priorities to determine the age. The test cannot override documentary evidence on the age of the accused person. Now, how reliable is this particular test? So we have got the variability in observing the maturation of bones, and this could impact the accuracy of the test also. Obviously, it gives you a range of age. It cannot determine or cannot give you the exact age of that person. Slight differences in the development among the individuals. Ossification tests give a range, say 17 to 19. Courts have dealt with the question of margin of error. Again, the Delhi High Court said this year that in the POCSO cases, that is protection of children from sexual offences cases, where the age of the victim is determined through the ossification test, the upper age in the test reference range should be considered. Right. This obviously you need not to memorize this, but just for the understanding, because there can be a question with respect to the ossification test, that why we use the ossification test, or which part of the human body is used in the ossification process. Now, one thing is important, as I said, Juvenile Justice Act. So we have got the Juvenile Justice Care and Protection Act of 2015. This was primarily enacted to provide a framework for the care, protection, and treatment and rehabilitation of children in conflict with the law and children in need of care and protection. So 2 kinds of divisions have been made: children's in the conflict of law and children's in the need of care and protection. So we have children's in the conflict of law, those alleged or found have committed an offense under the age of 18, or children in the need of care and protection, vulnerable children like orphans, street children, and victims of abuse. Age for heinous crimes. So the act allows juveniles aged between 16 to be 18 to be tried as an adults if they commit heinous offences, 7 years or more of imprisonment. The Juvenile Justice Board assesses whether a child should be tried as an adult or not. Juvenile Justice Board, what it is, as I said, it comprises of a magistrate and 2 social workers. They are responsible for the trial of children in conflict with the law and determining the appropriate course of action. Then we have got child welfare committees. So CWCs are established for ensuring the care, rehabilitation, and reintegration of children in need of care and protection. Rehabilitation and social integration. The Act emphasizes on rehabilitating juveniles through counseling, education, vocational training, and protection homes. Adoption, it also deals with the adoption aspect. So it simplifies the adoption procedures through Central Adoption Resource Authority. Now you need to tell me under which ministry this CARA comes. That is Central Adoption Resource Authority. So here we come to the end of the session. I hope you really enjoyed the session. All the best. Thank you so much.